Welcome to the Walled Garden Podcast. Here we nourish the gardens of our minds, one meaningful conversation at a time. If you'd like to find out more, go to thewalledgarden.com. Thanks for joining us. Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of the Walled Garden Podcast. So today's episode has been in the waiting for quite some time now. It's been on the Walled Garden website for our members for about 2 months now since we had the conversation, but I'm absolutely thrilled to be releasing it to all of you today. And it is a conversation with somebody who I have come to absolutely adore since my recent interactions with her. Her name is Karen Duffy. Now, many of you will actually know Karen already. You might have seen her in the various movies that she's done. You may have seen her at Stoicon conferences. She's presented at many of those. Or you might have already read her new best-selling work of philosophy called Wise Up: Irreverent Enlightenment from a Mother Who's Been Through It. And that's the topic of our conversation today. We were discussing that new book with her, and it was a real joy to do so because she is so passionate about these topics that she's sharing with us in this work. And she's done very well with this so far. I'm sure that all of you have heard about the release of this book. And I want to give you a little bit of context in case you don't quite know Karen yet. So I'm going to read you a little bit here from her bio, and then we'll dive straight into the conversation. So from becoming an iconic MTV VJ to starring in Dumb and Dumber, to being diagnosed with a life-threatening disease, Karen Duffy has been through a lot. But it was only when she became a mother that she realized she had some pretty solid life lessons to pass down. In her new book, she offers advice on building a friend group that is weasel-free, finding the love of your life, and determining how much to tip the waiter. As with everything, be generous. With dry humor and maternal warmth, she shows how we can all learn from unexpected philosophers, even from Bulgarian dancing bears. There are times in life when we should turn to wisdom of great thinkers. And there are times when you need the kind of enlightenment that can only come from a former Coney Island mermaid queen. Wise Up offers wise cracks and some profound insights in a unique book of parental inspiration. And so that is Karen Duffy in a nutshell. And as I said, I'm really looking forward to you hearing this conversation. Before we dive in, I do just want to let you know we have a meetup coming up in the Walled Garden with our very own Sharon LaBelle on the topic of holiness. What is holiness and why is it so important for our lives? And so if you're interested in coming along to that, just head to thewalledgarden.com/events and you can register there. We'd love to see you there. That's on the 9th of June. And one more thing to bear in mind, while you're on the website, make sure you subscribe to the Garden Pickings email newsletter, because over the next month or so, we are going to be launching some very exciting news about the Walled Garden. Seriously, guys, we are putting together such a phenomenal team of philosophers and podcasters from all around the world who are banding together to create this community around that shared purpose of seeking and embodying better wisdom within our lives. And I am so excited to see where this all goes. But as I said, while you're on the website, you're going to want to subscribe to that newsletter so that you're the first to know when we release new information about that over the coming weeks. But all you need to know from now is it's very, very exciting, the kinds of people who we've got coming on board in this organization. So with all of that said, I just want to introduce you again to the wonderful, the amazing Karen Duffy. I hope you enjoy this conversation. We've had an actor on the show before. Now we have an actress, which means that we are slowly making our ways towards being a philosophical TMZ, which is great. I love this. and it's just, I guess the first thing that I wanted to do is just give you a chance for anybody who's listening to this after the conversation, just tell us who you are, perhaps what makes you feel alive. What's your life experience been? Tell us your whole life story within a few minutes, please.
Within a few moments. Well, thank you very much. It is an honor. I listen to this podcast religiously, meaning I kneel and don a veil when I am listening to you guys, having you in my ear holes. I live in New York City, and I've had a very interesting career where I was an MTV VJ back in the day when MTV played music, and worked as an actress. And I was in Dumb and Dumber and a bunch of Woody Allen films, and it felt like I was building this plane by hand with my career. And then I was at the Emmy Awards, which is an American award show for a TV show I was doing with Michael Moore and the BBC. And it was like I got struck by lightning. It was like an electric eel was swimming up my spinal column. And I was diagnosed with sarcoidosis of the central nervous system. And what's interesting with being an actor is that you have to pass a physical in order to be hired. And because of my brain injury, my this granuloma lesion that I have, I can no longer pass this physical, so I can no longer be employed. So I'd always worked as a writer, and so I really focused more on writing and producing. But I found to be a writer, you need to be a reader, and I found Stoic philosophy to be an unbelievable scaffolding as I tried to navigate living life with chronic pain. So here I am 2 decades later, and today I have a new book out called Wise Up, and it's an epistolary, a collection of letters about living a great life based on the thesis of Epictetus. And just to reduce the quote is the sense that if you make beautiful choices, you will make a beautiful life.
Yeah, and that's such a perfect segue, because I mean, when we spoke earlier on, the first thing that stood out to me, apart from your own beauty, of course, is the beauty of your room that you're in. And I looked at that room and I thought, oh my gosh, we're kindred spirits, because I love seeing people take the care and the time to make their room beautiful. And so I immediately thought beauty must play an incredibly important role in your life. And I actually wanted to ask you about that. You know, what role does beauty play for you?
Well, being a New Yorker, I love that every day I walk out the door, I never know what's going to happen and what I am going to see. And I think beauty's not passive. It's something that we have to look for and we have to create. And I never thought of it that way, but thank you for pointing that out. It gives me something to think about. That gratitude is a big part of my life, because I live in chronic pain and it can capsize you. And I didn't want chronic pain to make me mean. I wanted to keep finding beauty and creating beauty. And that is a goal. In the way where every day we have a choice where we can be useful or useless, I think we also have a choice the way we perceive things. And I also think we can train our eyes to look for beauty.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that you have to start, like you say, you have to participate. You have to start creating beauty around you. I mean, as you see behind me, I've got a whole bunch of paintings. That was actually a huge step for me, just to say, you know what? I love this Aboriginal artist. I'm going to spend $170 on getting a painting that I love. You know, like that was a huge step for me to even get over that and yeah, it's actually worth paying a little bit of money to have something absolutely transcendently beauty in your home that you look at and it just inspires you, it lifts you, and it absolutely pays off in the long run. Um, and you also mentioned earlier, just as we were chatting, you, maybe for the video section of this podcast, you could show us again. You've put a moustache on your face on the book,
Oh, yes.
which I absolutely love.
So yes, I customized the hardcover for anyone who gets it from me with mustaches and googly eyes. I bought thousands of mustaches because this airbrushed idea to me to be published by a feminist press. And I was like, where's my liver spots? Where's my mustache? I mean, that is beauty. I mean, I am at entry level old age. And I think that, we tend to, getting older is a lot more fun than it looks. And I think if you have that spirit, you have a lot more control about how you're going to feel when you wake up in the morning and not comparing yourself to others.
Like to me, when I see you showing that, and yeah, you bought all these moustaches and stuff like that, and it just what it screams out to me is that you also place humor and laughter and silliness at a very high level in your life, and of course that comes out in your book as well. And I think that I'd just love to hear you talk about how silliness and humor is important to you, why it's important to you.
Well, again, uh, I think I live a life in very high contrast, where being in a lot of pain, I have to squeeze as much fun as I can out of every moment. And, I believe that pain is inevitable. We will all feel pain, but suffering is optional. So you can live in, and I'm talking about physical pain, but you can live in physical pain, but in a way, I've kind of tried to make peace with it. I'm negotiating a treaty. It's interesting in chronic illness, there are all these warlike metaphors, like we're going to take this chemo and we're going to kill it, and you're going to battle this, and you're going to be a warrior. And there's all these warlike metaphors. And I told my doctor, like, I'm a lover, not a fighter. Like, I don't really want to have the visualization of my white blood cells, and my red blood cells, and everyone's attacking, and the chemo. I was like, I would rather, in this vessel of mine, imagine that the chemo and radiation are working like in cahoots, but with vigor. But I don't need all of the warlike metaphors. I am happy to make a grand plan to change that.
How do you think that that's something that you just were brought up with, that approach to these things, or is that something that came from your study of philosophy? What do you think it was?
I believe I've read myself a new brain, and it's almost like my life has been bisected. I was lucky to spend half my life in the world of the healthy, and the second half, but it's still my life, and I have to make the best of it. And time is our treasure, and we become what we think about the most. And if I just thought, oh, I'm a miserable sack of organs, and oh, my neck hurts. Yeah, my neck hurts all the time, but I really focus on what amuses me, what can make me happy, how can I make somebody else happy. When I go into the hospital, I have been doing this for the past few years. When you're the dynamic when you are a patient in the hospital is you don't have any clothes on, your doctor's in street clothes. Everyone tends to there's this pitying vibe. So I was like, well, how can I change that? So I just started ordering candy necklaces by the thousands. And I just stick them in my bag. And when I walk out the door and I'm in the cab, I'm like, hey, you want a candy necklace? I have yet to meet a person who has said no to a candy necklace. And so it's then changing the dynamic where, oh, it's, poor old me trying, in a wheelchair, getting from test to test. It's like, oh, there's that broad with the candy necklaces. Go check her out. So I feel like I now have control over it, and it tends to work.
I have to give a fair warning to all of our listeners. I feel like the whole candy necklace idea would only work for people who definitely do not give an aura of creepiness and I feel like you can get away with it probably way more than somebody like perhaps me or even Kai. It's like, hey, you want a candy necklace? It's okay. Please step out of my Uber. But I think you're exactly right. That's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. This idea and Kai, I think that this is going to be one of our stoic habits. Have a bag full of candy necklaces to spread joy around, around the world, right?
It's funny that you say that because when I just asked my friend one of those questions, like, if you were a man for a day, what would you do? Right. And she
not hand out candy necklaces.
Right, exactly. And that was my point. That she was like, I'm gonna stand up and do this, do that, the other. So if I was a woman for a day, I would spend time in the park with children, because you can't do that as a man. You can't really just enjoy the simplicity. She was like, whoa. I don't know what she expected me to say.
Pedophiles have really ruined children for all men out there, right? It's just, you can't, think a kid's cute. You can't be like, oh my gosh.
You can't give out candy necklaces.
Well, we also have Gardenia Day. Another friend of mine started sending me gardenias, and they're my favorite flower, and they're waxy and they are very delicate. And there was a free subscription and somebody generously sent them to me. And so I call my friend, it comes in once a month, and it's like Gardenia Day. And we just walk around, two girls in the village handing out gardenias. And so it is, you can also do it, again, like I'm trying to think like, oh, you could do it with a smile, but no, that could be creepy, or a wink, like of what your chromosome makeup, you have a harder time of it.
Well, I think that there are ways to get around it. And I think that, look, if we look at the big principle of what you're trying to say, it's like be a giver, give joy to people wherever you go. It's such a beautiful way to be. And I just love that, man. Even, I remember I was speaking recently with a guy who, he's this older fellow here on the Sunshine Coast, has done very well for himself, very, very successful in many ways. And I was speaking to him about his organization that he's put together, and it's all to do with encouraging people. And he gave me this little box of cards, and he said, they've just got a little quote and a picture on one side, and you can write something on there. Just go give one of these cards to the person who gives you coffee at the cafe. Give it to somebody who you feel like might just need a little bit of encouragement in that day. And I think that what is so amazing is how much of an aversion we have to actually putting ourselves in the situation of actually giving something. It's so difficult to actually be like, okay, I'm going to humble myself before this gigantic goal of giving a card to somebody and saying, thank you. I really appreciate you. It's so difficult, right? Did you find it was difficult at the start to actually take that first step and be like, oh, here's some candy?
No, because, I was
it seems like
terrified.
You have that distribution, that disposition.
Yes. But it's interesting. In our family, we have a tradition where we choose a motto for the year, and it's not a big deal. It's not a ceremony. We just think, like, what are we going to write on our hearts? And my son, a couple years ago, picked out, life gives to the giver and takes from the taker. It's from Reverend Run from Run DMC. So not all of my philosophy comes from dead white men. And but I love this idea that life gives to the giver and takes from the taker. And what would it take for us to be givers? And the generosity of spirit is this year, one of the things we were negotiating on our motto was never suppress a generous impulse. And I think that's a nice little one, but it's been really fun having this tradition of picking a motto for the three of us that we all connect with and then tune into and try and live by.
I wonder what you think about receiving as well, because it seems to me like that's also something that is extremely difficult for people to do, is to actually receive with grace when somebody is offering a hand of encouragement or a hand of just a nice hand of what am I trying to say here? We have a hard time actually receiving things as well. And do you not also think that we need to learn how to receive with grace, to receive? And I'm sure that you, throughout your life, you've gone through so many trials. You've probably had a bunch of people around you who have, offered their help in times of need, right?
Absolutely. And you expressed it so beautifully, because there is a difficulty in receiving. And it's not weakness. Perhaps it's pride. I find it much easier because to be the one who's the one-man conga line that's like a Mardi Gras parade, sharing things. What's interesting is I had a cousin who worked for the NYPD, New York Police Department, and he was killed on the job. And I was a young kid then. And years later, I realized, wow, I'm the age that Tim was, and Tim never got to live this life. So in honor of Tim and his sacrifice, it was a hostage situation. There were 30 hostages, and he went in and ultimately lost his life. But I thought, I am now at the age that he is. In honor of him, I'm going to write a thank you note every day. And it's not email, and there's no return address, there's no reciprocity, but I like sending moments of gratitude and appreciation through the U.S. Postal Service. And I try and do it every day. Some days I don't, but I think like having a goal or a purpose where I want to be this engine of determination to say thank you to people, because I think that we need more of it. It's been somewhat diminished.
Well, it's actually really, Kai, do you want to jump in? Because I'm
just
sure that we're
Sharon
both thinking
LaBelle.
the exact same thing.
Yeah, like Sharon LaBelle was like, you think about Sharon LaBelle at that moment? Because I was thinking about, because she threw down the gauntlet like 3 months ago and asked us to write letters to people. And it's just been a test. And I was like, okay, like, I won't spoil it for you because I will ask for your address so that you can see it yourself. But the idea of just writing. And I thought that I was a bit skeptical when she said the biggest change will be you. I was like, what's going to change? But when I type an email, it's very transactional. So if I were to type you an email, which I have done, like it's a transactional thing, generally speaking. But whenever I've written a letter, it's a completely different mindset. I think much more philosophically, I feel freer to like connect as a human being in a way that in email, I just can't. And I just wanted to ask you, Duff, like, do you find it the same way? And did you find that when you were writing your book, that you could also have that freedom to connect with your audience, whoever that may be, in a way that you can't do in any other manner? And perhaps, I mean, as you start in like films, maybe you would say, well, in films it's exactly the same. Or is it? Because I don't know. I've never been behind that screen. So I just wanted to ask you, like, your deepest, profoundest connection you can make with a relative stranger. Where is it, and how have you cultivated it?
Absolutely, it's such a great question, Kai. And I love writing letters. I love designing letterhead. I will often make letterhead for people and send it to them unsolicited, because it makes me happy. And I am trying to inspire people to, I find I express myself more from the heart with my left hand. The reason why we wear a wedding ring on our left ring finger is that the ancients believed we had a vein that went right from our left ring finger to our heart. And I love it's somewhat intimate, you're writing a note and then you gotta lick it, so, you're, and I like, putting things little, like a playing card or something that I've found. And it was interesting writing this book. I'd written it as a book of essays, and I was like, okay, this is a good book. And then I was in Greece. I was at a film institute in the Peloponnese, and I was thinking about Seneca and Letters to a Young Stoic, and I thought, if I took these ideas, which is essentially how Stoic philosophy has become a scaffold for my life, and wrote it to a person who I love deeply, could I get the love to radiate off that page? And I wanted the reader to feel the good vibes, like shooting off the page. So that's why I made it an epistolary and asked my son, may I address these letters to you? And what's interesting is that he's a teenage young man, and he said, yes, but I'm going to ask you, don't use my nickname. Like, I am proud of you, and I am proud of, what you've taught me with regards to the Stoics. So I feel that I never put the two together until this conversation, that yes, that perhaps my love for writing handwritten letters, pen and paper, is possibly the seed for why I changed the book to make it an epistolary.
I love that. And I think it's so necessary for people to know that there is that massive shift when you actually get a pen and a piece of paper or a journal and shut the computer, turn off your phone, light a candle at night. Oh, nothing is better than writing by candlelight. It's like
little bourbon, little Casamigos,
just go it up. To me, it seems like you're actually almost going back in time and participating in a tradition that humans have done for now hundreds of years. And that's so ingrained in us. And there's something so beautiful about that. I just love that you do that. And I wonder, would you give us the Walled Garden exclusive of your son's nickname?
His nickname is Lefty.
Lefty. Okay. Are we the first place?
You were there. When he was a baby, I bought an old Silver Cross pram, like the old school, like baby buggy. And right. I brought it to the hot rod detailer, and I had it totally tricked out. It was like, it looked like I went to the stock car detailer. So it was black with orange flames, and it was insane. And it was as big as a bathtub. And so my babysitter, I was a little bit more well-known then. And so she's like, all these people are coming up. I don't think I can't get through the park because this is such an object. So, and she said, and how can I tell? Everybody says that they know you. And I said, okay, if they say that the baby's name is Lefty, then it's really my son. But if they say Jack, well, then anyone could know that. So that was his secret. But, when we're talking about writing letters, one of the things that I love is I wrote Wise Up like a magpie, just collecting astounding bits of ephemera. And like the reason why we have margins. So when we write margins on paper, we leave them, but also we do it digitally. Well, that was because rats at the time of the scribes would eat the edges of the paper and the papyrus. So the reason why we have margins is essentially it's rat food. And I think it's really amazing that we took this idea that's been around for 600, 800 years, and we are adapting it to our digital life. Like we always leave a margin of rat food when there's no rats on. Well, actually, we do have a mouse, right? I guess if you use that type of computer. So maybe I'm not all off on a tangent.
No, wow, that's
really interesting.
It's interesting. It's always good to have fun little facts like that. And by the way, we are going to have to get a photo of your buggy that you put together for Lefty. So yes, that's going to happen. But perhaps have you got one close by?
Yeah, I'll find one somewhere
cool.
in my office. I'll find one.
I really did want to dive into kind of the original emergence of your fascination with philosophy, because I was actually, Steve, it's great to have you here as well in the chat today. And I was just listening to Steve's conversation with you, and just this idea that what's happening with your book, and perhaps you could speak to the initial success that you've had, because it's really, really exciting. But making the ranks up in the world of philosophy. And I think that what's really important about your work is the bringing philosophy under like a wider, or opening the umbrella of philosophy and saying, hey, it's really cool under here. Come on underneath. We want you here. It's not a scary thing only for the academics, but it can be extremely practical, useful in our lives. And it is for everybody. And I think that more and more people are waking up to that. But I really wanted to get a sense of your beginning with philosophy, where it all started to illuminate your own mind, I guess.
When I finished my post-grad degree, I was like, that can't be it. I've got to keep getting smarter. I've got a long life ahead of me.
Do you mind me just quickly asking what your post-grad degree was?
Recreational therapy.
Okay, awesome.
Interesting.
Which I'm guessing led to the chaplaincy, right?
Yes. It's very interesting that my degree is as a recreational therapist, and my job is to focus on working in communities with people with disabilities and focusing on ability, which is, again, very stoic, not lamenting what you don't have, but focusing on what you do. And when I was starting out, I was working with Alzheimer's patients, the dementia unit, and I loved that job. And what was interesting is that I'm very visible in a clinical setting. If you have a white doctor with white hair and a white coat up against a white wall, you can't see them. But I'm black and white and red. So very old people and babies can see me because I'm very high contrast. And I realized that my skill set working at the nursing home was I was working with people who have a short attention span. I had to focus on elocution and keeping them entertained. And then I realized, well, MTV is reducing the world's attention span, and I can actually use those systems and then pivot over to MTV. So that's how I went from working in a clinical setting into MTV. MTV, it's pop culture, it's cheeky. And again, I wanted to somehow elevate it a bit. I had never been in front of a camera, and I made a homemade video and sent it in unsolicited and got the job. And I was like, well, I better figure this out. So I would just go to the Museum of Broadcasting. I know once I got the job, then I figured now I got to figure out how to pull it off. So I went to the Museum of Broadcasting, and I would watch Frank Sinatra host his variety show. And I just saw, okay, how does the master do it? Well, he always got dressed up. So I always dressed up. And he always seemed to kind of be in the know. And so I also really started working with mnemonics so I could remember. One of the things when you see musicians, when they're on camera, they often wear sunglasses because this way they can read the teleprompter without missing eye contact. So kind of
That's
at
a good
MTV,
skill.
part of me, it's a good skill. Good thing to
Yeah,
know.
yeah. Now I know that why they went. They're not because they want to look cool. They want to cheat the system. That's great.
That's
another
exactly it.
When I'm wearing sunglasses while I'm interviewing people in the future, it's because I've got questions written down here that
That's fantastic.
So tell me,
I can't
Karen. Go on. Sorry.
So working at MTV, I was like, how can I make this as interesting as possible and make it interesting for me? And so I would challenge myself, and I would always try and weave in ephemera. And I grew up in a family of jocks, and there were just sports balls everywhere. And the only books were books like golfing in Ireland. So the way I rebelled was just moving in to the library. And I just fell in love with meditations and going through, I mean, it's, it truly, reading meditations, it felt like a firecracker went off in a cymbal factory. It was like, oh, this all makes sense. And what's been a gift is all the work I had in my previous life in pop culture. I'm now able to share the beauty of a radiant, stoic mind. I just did People magazine in America, and the editor is like, you're getting Epictetus in People magazine. Like, this is pop culture. This has never happened. He must be smiling. And I've always felt a real kinship, but I love that because, I think, we've met each other through many conferences and lectures over the past 5 years or so. And I love this opportunity to kind of open it up to people who, it was a little bit of a hard sell to get People and Good Day America, Good Morning America, Good Day New York, like all of these breakfast television shows to actually open up. But once they cracked open the book, they're like, okay, I got it. So I'm very grateful because this has helped me so much. Your writings have been so meaningful. Your speeches are so meaningful, the work that you do. And I just love that in my tiny little way, I have a megaphone to a whole new audience that maybe wouldn't be as connected to the walled garden or to the Sunday Stoic.
Yeah. I think it's absolutely necessary that we have people like you who are in those different worlds where people would not naturally be thinking about philosophy or wisdom. This is, the fact that your book is called Wise Up is so beautiful because we've often talked about just how often do we actually hear in pop culture or in our politics or in the major centers of communication in our cultures, even the word wisdom or virtue, it just doesn't come up. Like I really genuinely believe that the first question that should be asked in any presidential debate, what is your definition of wisdom? just tell me what that is. I want to know if you've thought about these sorts of things, because perhaps the people who have the most power in our societies should have some idea or some philosophical sophistication. But nonetheless, I wanted to ask you, Stoicism in particular, was it kind of just a fortuitous meeting of these minds where you just came across this book and Marcus Aurelius, and was there a particular reason why the philosophy stood out to you so much and has had such a big impact?
I think the reason why I'm so connected to the Stoics is the practicality and just discourses, meditations. I love that meditations was his private journal. And I think that is a great departure point. It's interesting with the title of Wise Up Without the Mustache, that my publisher would not allow me to use the words Stoicism, classical wisdom, and so that was a real thought problem. How am I going? This is a book about Stoic philosophy, and I cannot, will not, I won't publish it if it has those words. So I wanted it to feel like a smack in the face. So I thought Wise Up would work. So it did work out, but
that's so weird though, because Stoicism, anything with Stoicism on it sells like hotcakes these days. I mean, it's like it's like the buzzword in philosophy, right? I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me.
I know. Well, this is a feminist press, and really,
not to women. I was about to say that's not the case for female
true.
audience.
Okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Stuff was already there, but yeah, I was like, yeah, it sells to a certain type of person who typically doesn't have to be, but typically male, typically in the IT world, right? And so they're going to say, okay, but they're not your audience, right? Because I mean, your audience is not going to be particularly, Ryan Holiday's audience. I'm not saying there's no crossover; it just doesn't seem to be very obvious. So you had to grab their attention in a way that spoke to them first, and then kind of, I'm sure your second book, you're going to have a lot more freedom in the way that you can say, look, now they believe in me, as a writer of this genre. And I'm sure, hopefully, I'm like my fingers and toes crossed, you get to sneak in the word virtue in there, and you get to talk about some like flourishing and like some very sort of technical
eudaimonia. Yes, exactly.
Love to get that in there. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting, Kai, because this is my fourth book, and every single book has had a very strong backbone of the Stoics. In my very first book, which came out in I think 2000, called Model Patient, Marcus Aurelius is all over that book. And my most recent book, Backbone, which is really about living with chronic pain, in harmony with chronic pain. Again, there is such a, you can really see the impact of Stoicism has, that it is indelible in my heart. And so Wise Up is really a more, I would say, concentrated version of the way, my interpretation of how the Stoics, what they mean to me. It's essentially a love letter. I mean, there's many meanings in the letters.
Love letter. I love that. A love letter to wisdom. A love letter to the great teachers of your life. And I perhaps want to. This might be my last question. Then, if Kai, if you have any other questions that you want to add, please do. But we were talking earlier about Bill Murray, and one of the reasons why it was so inspiring to you is that he actually decided, after he got his initial fame, to go and spend 4 years studying philosophy in Paris, which is something that I would imagine you're not going to see a lot of people in that kind of industry doing. It's kind of a big move. And I wonder, maybe, seeing as you've spent so much time in this industry, could you give us some insight into some of the more notable examples of people who you've seen actually survive that level of fame with a sense of wisdom and flourishing, not letting it get to them in such an insane way?
That's a great question. Bill Murray truly is a philosopher, and there's this idea that Groundhog Day there's a real philosophical center. I just produced a concert film that stars Bill Murray. He performs with a quartet, and it closed the Cannes Film Festival last year. And so Bill and I have been friends for 30 years. And the way he views life, again, he is a trickster. And I would say, I want to squeeze as much happiness out of life. I see him as a human crop sprayer of happiness. When he walks into a room, the room tilts in his direction and people are just in awe. And Billy, I love this quote. Billy was like, friends are weird. I mean, you pick a human and you're like, I like that one. And then you spend time with them. So it's really great to see. I love seeing how Bill navigates life. He lives outside of LA. He lives in Charleston, South Carolina. He has an 800 number. So anytime a filmmaker wants to get in touch with him, they just have to call this 800 number and leave a message. And he maybe checks this number maybe 3 times a year. So a lot of times I get all the scripts from him. People will send them to me since we're friends. But I love to see that he's disconnected from fame. I think taking that time off to study philosophy and really understand his heart and what would make him happy worked. He is a radiant example. And I would say George Clooney, it was funny. George, again, and I are old buddies, and there's a story in Ryan Holiday's book, Ego is the Enemy, I believe, or no, The Obstacle is the Way, where Ryan tells the story how George really became the George Clooney that we know, the kind of Cary Grant, when he realized that rather than looking that I'm the actor and I am like prostrating myself in front of the producer begging for a movie. And he said, if I pivoted that those producers have a problem. They need the best actor that they can find. And how lucky that I'm the solution to their problem. So we had dinner the other night and I had been talking with Ryan and I said, do you remember this? He goes, I don't remember that story at all. But I was like, he goes, it's so good. Thank you. He was very grateful that Ryan remembered it. But seeing also what's great about, I would say with George and with Bill is there's this amazing story about Kurt Vonnegut and Joseph Heller. And they were out in the Hamptons, a very posh area. And they were at this billionaire's house. And Vonnegut says to Joseph Heller, who wrote Catch-22, he said, Joe, I mean, can you believe the way that this guy lives? And Joseph Heller said, yeah, it's really nice. And Vonnegut goes, dude, he makes in a day what you've made in Catch-22 in your life. And he said, well, good for him. But I have something that this billionaire will never have. And Vonnegut goes, what? And he goes, enough. I know what's enough. And I find that to be so touching. And what I love about my George and Bill is that they have enough. They are not, again, clawing for fame. They are not clawing for roles. They have enough. And not only that, George, every penny that George makes from his tequila goes to his Human Rights Foundation. And again, we're old Catholics. And the idea is if you do something good and somebody finds out about it, it doesn't count. So he will never talk about it. But as his friend, I can share it with you.
I love that. And I love the casual drop of having dinner with George Clooney the other night is quite profound as well. But it's
no. He's like it would be like you and Kai meeting in Cambridge for a coffee,
which we have yet to do, but will happen absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
This has been just such a pleasure. Duff, and it's been great to meet you. I wanted to get a sense of who you are in this conversation. And I think that I've really gotten that today. Kai, did you have any kind of closing questions?
Yeah, and it's quite, as you're a very deep person and you have a way with word stuff. What's the one sentence that you've said, like in a film, right, that you would want your son to say at your funeral?
Wow, that's an interesting question.
Something that I've said in a film. Let's see. Well, from a film, honestly, I am a horrible actor. I mean, in a way, my sarcoidosis, my brain lesion, the fact that I can no longer be insured to be in a film has really been a grace, because I did a movie that is so bad that I wouldn't watch it if it was screening on my own corneas. I would take a rusty tuna can in order to save myself from having to watch this movie Blank Check.
It was Blank Check, because I'm going to go watch that now because I love bad movies.
No, pretty much. There's honestly, fellas, there's not a good one in the bunch. Like, I mean, Dumb and Dumber may be the peak. But it's funny because I think my son would say my mom was she was a great mom, but she was a terrible actress. And honestly, I mean, I'm easy going. I'm like loose. I'm comfortable. You put a movie camera on, and I'm like all of a sudden, all of that just gone. So maybe as I'm looking at this picture by Frank Sinatra, that she did it her way. That would be great. That would be a very good epitaph.
You know, I'm going to be so selfish here, and I'm going to finish up with a wild, just linked series of thoughts here. So, you know, you obviously know George Clooney. One of my favorite jazz singers of all time was his auntie, Rosemary Clooney. Such a stunning musician. But so here's connection number one. She used to sing this song called Come On to My House, which is one of the worst songs I've ever heard in my life. The lyrics, essentially, you couldn't get it past the producers today. The lyrics are like, come on to my house, I want to give you candy. Come on to my house, come on to my house. I want to give you sugar and plum and a little thing nice, or something like that. And there's these creepy like bones.
And I want to give you everything.
Yeah. Come on to my, it's like freaky. It's like some gypsy song. I don't know what they were thinking.
Do you know who wrote it?
Who wrote it?
The writer, William Saroyan, the great American short story writer, William Saroyan. Wow. He wrote that on a bet.
Wow. Well, he should have known better. So the thing about this, so that's connection number one, because you're a person who goes around giving people candy. But also towards the end of her life, Rosemary said, man, I've recorded some terrible music in my time. And we're sitting here with you now. You know George Clooney, so you got that link to it, and we're coming all these circles around back to, it's like it's fine. It's fine to look back and think, you know what, that was terrible. But
that's got to be the funeral song now. That's got to be one of the funeral songs, just because there's too many connections there.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
But you know what's funny is, because my son was laughing when we were talking about how bad Blank Check is. And I said, Jack, somebody has to make the bad ones. They all can't be good. And so somebody has to make the bad movies. And for a good run, that was my job. I'm glad to pass that baton and no longer be in front of the camera making bad movies, but I'm having a great time making them. So we've got this amazing documentary called New Worlds about Bill Murray's classical quartet. He performed at the Acropolis. It's like Yanni, but Bill Murray, and really great. And so my production partner was my son's babysitter. He was a film student at NYU. And I was like, why don't we try making movies? Like, I don't know, you got a film degree, let's give it a shot. So he was about 20, and my husband travels all the time. So we were at a party, and I introduced him to a friend of mine who's a journalist. And my partner, Andrew, asked a great question to a journalist. He said, what is the best story that you never reported on as a journalist? And she told us this amazing story of a guy named Chicky Donahue, who was a sand hog, meaning in New York City, builds all the tunnels for the subways. And when in the 1960s, Chicky had served in Vietnam and came back. And in between, he got back to Inwood, part of Manhattan, and 4 of his best friends had been drafted. And this was anti-war protests, and he'd just come back. He was very conflicted. And he was like, all I wanted was in Vietnam was a cold Pabst Blue Ribbon, which is a cheap American beer. I'm going to go, and I'm going to go bring our boys some Pabst Blue Ribbon. And he did. He got on a munition ship and had a duffel bag with about 18 bottles of Pabst Blue Ribbon, met every one of his friends from the neighborhood, and got stuck during the Tet Offensive and was stuck in Vietnam for about 8 months. So my partner and I always say, we're just going to tell good stories. And this is called The World's Greatest Beer Run. And it will be opening in the fall. And this is a good movie. It's with Russell Crowe, Zac Efron, and Bill Murray.
Wow. Wow,
It's a good
amazing.
story.
I hope we get to talk to you more about that when that comes out as well.
So you're gonna come back on?
Yes.
Absolutely.
And I think, you're such a great example of that stoic idea. It's not what you did years and years ago. It's what you're doing now at this point. What are you bringing to the world now? And with your book Wise Up, and with everything you're trying to put into the world, all the goodness you're putting out into the world, man, we appreciate that. So thank you. Thank you, Duff. It's been such a pleasure today. And hopefully you'll just stick around for a couple of minutes after we officially end the interview. But is there anything you wanted to finish up by saying to our audience?
Well, I would just like to thank you for, I studied recreation in college. God, you're at Cambridge. You guys are creating. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you for making the world less stupid. Thank you for making the world more beautiful. The walled garden is truly a spectacular respite in the internet. I believe it was it Emerson and no, Cicero said, all a man needs is a library and a garden. And you have given us that. So thank you.
We're working on it.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Duff. All right,
Great. Cheers, guys. Thanks.
You've been listening to the Walled Garden podcast. If you'd like to attend any of our free meetups and events, or if you'd like to get one-on-one mentoring with either Sharon LaBelle, Kai Whiting, or myself, just go to thewalledgarden.com. But for now, don't forget to nourish those gardens in your mind.